Madeline Kingsbury dropped her children off at daycare, apologised for being late, and drove back home. It was the last ordinary thing she would ever do. By afternoon, she was missing from work. By nightfall, her phone was ringing endlessly into the dark. And 69 days later, a deputy following a trail of digital evidence pulled up to a remote gravel road where a hidden drainage culvert held a devastating answer. What happened in those missing hours is a story of control, betrayal, and a community that refused to stop searching. Winona, Minnesota is a small city tucked along the Mississippi River, framed by limestone bluffs and a close-knit, hard-working community. It's the kind of place where everybody seems to know somebody and where a missing person doesn't stay a stranger for long. In the spring of 2023, this quiet river city would become the centre of one of the largest investigations its police department had ever conducted. Madeline Kingsbury was born on the 1st of June, 1996, the youngest of 3 children, and she grew up in Farmington, Minnesota, just south of the Twin Cities. Her sister Megan remembered her as loud, talkative, and always singing, a girl who wanted to be the centre of attention and try everything at once. She would jump into the deep end of the swimming pool before she even knew how to swim. That was Maddi, brave before she was ready, and always so certain everything would work out. She went to Winona State University, where she pledged a sorority and instantly bonded with a fellow student named Holly Stamshaw. After their first sorority meeting, Holly invited her over, and Maddi more or less moved in for the rest of freshman year. Holly remembers her as innocent, goofy, and impossibly smart. "How this tiny, goofy package can just have this big brain," she said. She was very impressive and like a warm being. Just a door down the hall from Holly lived another student. His name was Adam Fravel, and he would become the central figure in Madeline's story for reasons nobody could have predicted. Adam was born on the 29th of January, 1994, the youngest of 3, and he'd grown up on a farm about an hour south of Winona, near the small town of Mabel. He was a country boy, and Maddi was a city girl who knew nothing about country life, according to those who watched their relationship unfold. She threw herself into learning it all. Those who knew them both in the early days described a couple who seemed genuinely happy together. Maddi adapted to farm life with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything else, and for a while it looked as though 2 very different upbringings had found a way to fit together. What began as a college friendship turned into a 7-year on-again, off-again relationship. Together, they had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and by 2023 they were living in a townhome on Kerry Drive in Winona. To the outside world, they looked like a young family finding their footing. Maddi threw herself into motherhood the same way she'd thrown herself into that swimming pool as a little girl, completely without hesitation. Maddi built a career she was proud of. She worked as a clinical research coordinator at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester in the fields of public health, infectious disease, and occupational medicine, and she was pursuing a graduate degree at the University of Minnesota at the same time. She was, by every account, a devoted mother. Everything she did seemed to circle back to her 2 young children, but behind the family photos, something was breaking down. Friends and family would later describe Adam as more of an absent father than the man he presented to the world, a man who leaned heavily on Maddi, financially and emotionally, while control crept into the relationship. In September 2021, Maddi called her mother, Krista Hultgren, in a state of panic. She said Adam had pushed her down onto the couch, wrapped his hands around her neck, and told her, "I can make you disappear like Gabby Petito." Gabby Petito was a young woman who had been strangled to death by her fiancé earlier that year, a case that had gripped the country. Krista said her daughter was hyperventilating, talking fast, frantic. She told Maddi to take the children and stay at her father's house for the weekend. Maddi's father, David, said he wasn't laughing when he heard about it. "I didn't find it very humorous," he told the courtroom years later. Adam would claim it had only ever been a joke, but it wasn't the only time. A friend later told police she had been on a video call with Maddi when Adam entered the room, yelled at her to keep quiet, and struck her across the face while she stood holding one of their children and cooking dinner. Another friend said she watched him push Maddi while she held their son. Bruises, late-night phone calls, a pattern that, piece by piece, would only fully come to light after she was gone. By early 2023, Maddi had made a decision. She and Adam were separating. They were still living under the same roof on Kerry Drive, but she was in the process of moving out, hoping to stay close enough that the children could still see their father. She'd also started seeing someone new, an old fraternity brother of Adam's named Spencer Sullivan. It had only been going on a few months, but it was enough. Maddi's mother and sister later told police that Adam wouldn't let her speak to Spencer while he was in the room, and demanded to see every text message that passed between them. When an officer asked Adam directly if he'd been upset when Spencer came into Maddi's life, he admitted, "I was hurt when I found out they were hanging out together." Domestic violence experts would later point to this exact moment as the most dangerous one in an abusive relationship, not the beginning. The leaving. Just a month before she vanished, Maddi visited a friend who was in hospital at the Mayo Clinic, where she worked. She told her friend that everything was bad with Adam at the house, that he'd been beating the hell out of her for years, and then she said something that would come back to haunt everyone who loved her. "If anything happens to me, know that Adam did it. I would never leave my kids." Friday the 31st of March, 2023, began like any other morning. At around 8 a.m, Maddi and Adam left their Kerry Drive home together, taking their 2 young children to daycare in Maddi's 2014 blue Chrysler Town and Country. Doorbell footage would later show the 4 of them walking up to the daycare door. "Sorry we're late," Maddi told the staff as they came in. It was such a small, ordinary thing to say. Nobody in that moment could have known it would be one of the last things she was ever heard to say at all. By 8:15 a.m, they were back home. Maddi exchanged a text with her sister Megan, laughing about a funny photo from a trip they'd taken to Rhode Island the previous summer. It was goofy, normal, the kind of message sisters send each other without a second thought. It was the last message Megan would ever get from her. At around 10 a.m, Adam told police he left the house in Maddi's van to run errands, saying he planned to drop some items off at his parents' place in Mabel, where the couple intended to move that weekend. Camera footage picked up the van heading south down Highway 43. But then, for roughly 45 minutes, after passing through the small township of Choice, Adam Fravel simply disappeared from the cameras. He would later tell investigators he turned around partway there, realizing the boxes in the back were meant for a storage unit across the street from their home in Winona, not for his parents' house. Maddi never showed up for work that day. She never picked her children up from daycare that afternoon, and she made no arrangements for anyone else to do it either. Friends and family began calling her mobile and her home phone. Every single call rang out. That evening, Maddi's close friend Katie Kolker couldn't reach her either, and something about it didn't sit right. She asked Megan to check on her sister. When Megan called Katie back, Katie told her the house was dark, nobody was home, but Maddi's van was still sitting in the driveway. On the morning of the 1st of April, Maddi's family filed a missing persons report with the Winona Police Department. For Winona Police Chief Tom Williams, the phone call that started it all came from his deputy chief. "I think something's wrong here," he was told. Officers pinged Maddi's phone. It showed up within about 100 feet of her own home. They contacted her employer and were told she had logged onto her work computer that morning and then logged straight back off. Her phone, her wallet, her ID and the jacket she'd worn that morning were all still inside the house. There was no sign she had left on foot and no indication another vehicle had come for her. Chief Williams called it exactly what it looked like. Her disappearance, he told the press, was involuntary, suspicious, and we are all concerned for her safety. Madeline Kingsbury did not wait quietly. She turned to TikTok, posting freshly out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, visibly panicked, and asked her followers directly for help finding her sister. "TikTok, I need you to do your thing," she said. "This is my sister Madeline Kingsbury." The The post spread fast, and so did the story. Search parties began forming almost immediately, first in the dozens, then the hundreds. On the 7th and 8th of April alone, more than 2,600 volunteers combed through Winona and Fillmore counties, some travelling from as far as south-central Wisconsin just to help. Later, searchers would draw crowds of nearly 2,000 people at a time. Search and rescue teams worked with horses, aircraft, and volunteer fire departments, block by block, field by field. How they rallied, Chief Williams would later say, in terms of citizens as well as law enforcement community and first responders. A $50,000 reward was offered for information leading to Maddi's safe return. Maddi's brother Stephen, an active member of the military for 14 years, flew home from overseas to join the search himself. Flyers with Maddi's photograph went up in shop windows across Winona. Volunteers organised out of a makeshift command centre, dividing up land, comparing notes, refusing to let the trail go cold. Police, meanwhile, asked residents along the Highway 43 corridor to check every camera they owned, doorbell footage, game cameras used for hunting, anything that might have caught sight of the blue Chrysler passing by between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. on the day Maddi vanished. Investigators pinged her phone repeatedly. It never moved. It stayed within 100 feet of the Kerry Drive townhome the entire time. But for investigators, suspicion was already beginning to settle in one direction. Fravel gave police an account of the day that didn't quite hold together. He said he'd last seen Maddi heading into her home office in the basement that Friday morning, and that he never checked on her again before leaving in her van. Digital evidence would later show he'd left his phone behind during part of his trip that day. And investigators found something else troubling, buried in the warrants they later applied for. The day before Maddi disappeared, Adam had reportedly turned off the location tracking on his phone and taken down the surveillance cameras at their home. He also, prosecutors would later argue, showed a striking lack of curiosity. When police first contacted him by phone, he didn't ask them a single question about what was actually being investigated, and there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. Investigators and child protection workers grew concerned enough that in early April they removed the two children from Adam's home, citing, in part, exposure to criminal activity in the children's home. Adam fought the decision in court. His attorney at the time, Zach Bauer, told reporters, "Law enforcement, I hope, is keeping an open mind in the investigation, and Adam has been cooperative with law enforcement and will continue to be so." On the 15th of May, while the search for Maddi was still ongoing, Adam filed a petition seeking custody of the children, a move that only deepened the public's unease. Weeks turned into more weeks. Divers searched the waterways. Volunteers walked the ditches and the tree lines along Highway 43. Police repeatedly asked residents along the corridor to check their doorbell cameras, their game cameras, anything that might have caught Maddi's van passing by. Still, there was nothing. Then, on the 7th of June, 2023, 69 days after Madeline Kingsbury was last seen alive, everything changed. A Fillmore County investigator was following up on a piece of digital evidence when it led him to a remote stretch of gravel road off Highway 43, just north of the small town of Mabel. At around 1:30 in the afternoon, in a drainage culvert hidden by brush at the side of the road, he found a body. It had been there the whole time, concealed in a spot investigators had already searched once before, without success. It would later come out that the discovery only happened because a sheriff's deputy noticed an unusually large number of flies gathering at the site. The following day, Winona Police Chief Tom Williams stood in front of the cameras and confirmed what everyone had feared. The remains belonged to Madeline Kingsbury. "Unfortunately, while this discovery is not what we were hoping for," Williams said, "we're thankful to be able to bring Maddi home to her family." That same evening, officers arrested Adam Fravel without incident at a residence in Mabel, Minnesota. The location was no coincidence. The spot where Maddi's body had been hidden, sat within several minutes of property belonging to Fravel's own family. The details of how she had been found were devastating. Maddi's body had been wrapped in a grey fitted bedsheet, secured with black gorilla tape, with a bathroom towel knotted around her neck. A medical examiner would later determine that she had died of homicidal violence, most likely asphyxiation, caused by that towel. When investigators searched the townhome on Kerry Drive, they found that the sheet, the tape, and the towel used to bind and conceal her all matched items from inside the home she had shared with Adam. 2 days after the discovery, on the 9th of June, Adam Fravel was formally charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. He made his first court appearance by video call, and a judge set his bail at $1 million with conditions, or $2 million without. That October, a grand jury returned an indictment for first-degree murder, adding to the charges against him. Investigators pieced together a timeline using cell tower data and camera footage that painted a very different picture from the one Adam had first given them. His van had been caught on camera driving down Highway 43 that morning, but for a critical stretch of roughly 45 minutes after passing through Choice Township, there was no trace of him at all. That unaccounted-for window sat almost precisely over the drive to, and from, the very culvert where Maddi's body would eventually be found. By the time Adam Fravel walked into court, the case against him had already been called too big for Winona, so it moved 136 miles away to a courtroom in Mankato where 12 strangers who'd never heard of Maddie Kingsbury would decide what really happened on Kerry Drive. The prosecution came out swinging. Special Prosecutor Phil Prokopowicz told the jury this wasn't a mystery. Fravel, he said, had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. No longer did the degrading comments work, the verbal threats, the physical abuse, the strangulation. He told them this relationship was no longer about him, and he was damned if she was going to let her take his kids and life from him. The defense answered fast. Attorney Zach Bauer stood up and told the jury they were about to convict the wrong man on rumors. The abuse claims, he argued, had been exaggerated after the fact, stitched together by friends who only started comparing notes once Maddi was already missing. He pointed to something the police had walked straight past. Vomit, found in the backyard the day she vanished, never tested, never explained. Then the prosecution answered back with a text message. Maddi had once written to Adam, telling him to stop putting his hands around her neck in front of their children. His reply was 2 words, "You'll adjust." Bauer pushed harder, calling it a joke taken out of context, the same defense Fravel had used the day he told Maddi she could end up like Gabby Petito. But the jury had already heard from Maddi's own parents, who described the moment their daughter called them in a panic, hyperventilating, saying Adam had pushed her onto the couch and wrapped his hands around her throat. A joke, the prosecution reminded them, doesn't leave a red mark on someone's neck. Fravel never took the stand. He sat and he watched as the state walked the jury through his own alibi and quietly took it apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left standing where his story used to be. Closing arguments were heard on the 6th of November, 2024. The jury deliberated into the next morning, and just before 10:45 a.m. on the 7th, the courtroom fell completely silent as the verdict was handed down. Adam Fravel was found guilty on all 4 counts. 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 of second-degree murder. He had shown almost no emotion throughout the trial, but when the verdict was read, he broke down, wiping tears from his face as several of his own family members sobbed. Outside the courthouse, Maddi's father David didn't pretend the moment was simple. "We're not going to get Madeline back," he said. "Fravel can't be punished enough." Her brother Daniel called it something bigger. "The jury and the state struck a blow for abused women today. You can't do this and get away with it." On the 17th of December 2024, Adam Fravel returned to a Winona courtroom for sentencing. Only the count of premeditated first-degree murder would carry a formal sentence. life in prison without the possibility of parole. Before Fravel learned his fate, Madeline's family stepped forward one by one to ensure the courtroom had to look him in the eye. Her mother, Krista Hultgren, spoke first. He could have treated Madeline like the extraordinary person she was, but he didn't. He ripped her from her children, her family, and her friends. Her sister, Megan Hancock, described watching their parents crumble into shadows of themselves. But it was her father, David, who pierced the room. He recounted the nightmare of holding his daughter and singing to her while she lay inside a body bag, and the promise he made her during those agonizing 69 days of searching. 69 days spent searching, desperately for her, he told the court, wondering if she was alive or dead. Judge Nancy Beitendorp addressed the courtroom before sentencing. Domestic violence affects not only the victim, but entire families and communities, leaving deep scars. When it was finally his turn to speak, Adam Fravel offered only a single line. "I never caused harm to Maddi, and I am innocent." He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is now held at a maximum security correctional facility in Minnesota. Fravel's attorney confirmed an immediate appeal, arguing there had been errors during the trial and insufficient evidence for 3 of his 4 charges. But in the spring of 2026, the Minnesota Supreme Court firmly shut the door, affirming his conviction. Yet long after the courtroom lights went out, Madeline's family turned their grief into protection, establishing the Madeline Kingsbury Foundation, where joy trickles in to support survivors of domestic abuse. Winona Police Chief Tom Williams has often wondered what might have happened if they hadn't searched as hard as they did. "What if we had never found her?" he asked. "Would we have gotten a trial?" Today, the 2 children Madeline shared with Adam are being raised by her parents, growing up far too young to understand what an entire community did to try to bring their mother home. Madeline Kingsbury was 26 years old. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter, a friend. She built a career helping others through medical research. She sang, she laughed, and she loved her children fiercely, right up until the very last ordinary morning she was given.